One of the major setbacks is the fact that live music has essentially stopped for the period of the pandemic. One of the really great things to be able to have done was to be able to play wedding gigs, receptions, cocktail hours, what we call casuals. Be it if you're a classical musician or be it if you're a jazz musician, you would be able to go somewhere if someone was having an event and be engaged for playing a set of music that was to the person who was celebrating the moment's desire, and you would get paid. You'd had a job, and that completely dried up. As a performing artist myself, someone who tours and plays concerts nationally and internationally, I have not played a real live concert in a hall before an audience in over a year. But in the post-pandemic period that we're now hopefully entering, I anticipate there to be an incredible pent-up desire for people to have events. That's one of the great things that will happen, hopefully. And I anticipate there being opportunities that for the past year have been non-existent. So this is one of the great conundrums for anyone in the arts. You don't go into the arts to be a musician and to live the life of an artist thinking job. That should always be in the back of your mind. You should always have a plan to sustain yourself, to provide yourself with shelter, food, medical services, all of those kinds of things. You have to realize every famous musician, except for one or two, had some kind of a day job, be it teaching, be it a church musician. Bach, J.S. Bach, one of the greatest musicians who ever walked the planet, was a church musician for his entire life. If you're a great jazz musician, you had to play weddings. You just had to do it, and you taught. You want to carry on the tradition. You wish to hand it off to a succeeding generation. But there's always been, and this is something that fascinates me, up until relatively recently, there's always been a class of musician that studied, prepared to become a professional, but also had interests elsewhere. I could have been a weatherman. I could have been an attorney. But one of the things I liked about going to university is the fact that I received a broad education that stimulated my intellect and my growth as a person. So I say that to every person who studies music, be sure to totally stimulate your interests in other areas. It depends upon your perspective. And it depends on what schools you're looking at specifically. In a generalized context, it has decreased. We have become a much more visual society. Music used to be an art that you would share with your family in the evening. You wouldn't watch TV. You'd sit around the piano or with a guitar and you'd sing songs. You had instruments the school gave you to use. You were taught. It was part of the curriculum, same way physical education is, and science. It was part of the Greek quadrivium. They understood the benefits of it. Whether you became a musician professionally or not is not the relevant issue. The issue is you were taught this skill and you carried on a life. What that resulted in was an entire sequence of generations of what we call the cultivated amateurs. I wouldn't say setbacks to my department. For instance, when I arrived at Sacramento State, there was a very small jazz curriculum. Very small. Now it's huge. And, there are always shifting tides that align themselves with either what we would call fashion. And I hate to say it that way because it kind of sounds purely trendy and demeaning. I don't mean it that way. I just mean this. There are tides. The tide goes out and you see all of these mussels and clams in the mud. The tide comes in and all of a sudden you see, certain bait fish being eaten by bigger fish. And that's what happens in music. So now we have a very big jazz curriculum, but the classical music curriculum has subsided.